getting deeper into the mental, is there any further context or research that you can share about the conscious versus unconscious mind when it comes to endurance?
Yeah, I mean, the first caveat I should say is that um, I am not a psychologist or a neuroscience scientist, and so that whole concept of conscious versus unconscious, when you talk to psychologists or to brain scientists or cognitive scientists, um, they bristle. Like the every it feels like every scientist I've spoken to has a different definition of like, is this true? Can we talk about conscious versus unconscious? Is this really more like Daniel Kahneman's system 1 versus system 2? There's all these different ways of talking about the different types of processing that we do, the different ways we react, the different ways our minds work. So what I would say in terms of what more we can say about that is that uh, what Freud thought 100 years ago is not the current thinking. It's not like I have repressed dreams from my childhood, and you know, when I try and want to race, really what I'm trying to do is make up for the fact that my potty training didn't go well or whatever. That it's this distinction between conscious and unconscious is much more nebulous. And I guess, look, and I will say again, not being a brain scientist at the forefront of brain science, I'm not confident of this, but I feel like it's much harder to make a distinction between conscious and unconscious than we might assume. That it's not this bright line, that there's this sort of continuum. Things are going on deep down below, like you know, our bodies are constantly sensing like the temperature, let's say, or hunger, and there's things that we kind of are semi-aware of, and then there's this sort of frontal lobe where we're fully aware and you know, trying to exert control. But yeah, so that's a waffly answer, but I think the key thing to understand is that it's not as simple as, you know, we have an ego and an id and a superego or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think when I was reading your book, I was also looking at it from the context or just a, you know, another rhetorical question or hypothesis that I had. I was like, oh, it's interesting. Like within my unconscious mind, is it any way possible that maybe there's some type of reserved energy store within my unconscious mind that I'm not really able to access, but potentially I could some way?
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, I think that's a really sort of powerful idea, and again, it's that idea that when you reach your limits, actually there is more if you can tap into your unconscious. I think that's true. I think that's true. And I think that, you know, that to me is one of the sort of the most exciting areas of inquiry in, let's say, the last 10 or 15 years of sports science. Um, it's more a question of like, what words do we use to describe that? So I think those words that I understand and you understand, and hopefully listeners understand, that there's, you know, that unconsciously, where let's say the brain is protecting you, the brain is saying
Mm.
you don't want to, you think you want to run out of energy, but you don't want to run out of energy because that's going to be really ugly and put you in danger. Um, I think in broad strokes that's true. Um, but when you try and say, okay, well, let's see, where is this unconscious, or how does this unconscious work? Then you find it becomes much harder to the words we use start to get difficult to define. But I think in practice, uh, it's true that we can unlock some of this hidden reserves. And so like a very simple example is, you do some endurance task all out, and there are lots of studies showing that if you're not fully fueled, let's say you wake up in the morning and you go do a 1 hour hard run, that if you then towards the end of that run take some sports drink, swish it in your mouth, and spit it out. So you haven't even changed the fuel, and it's not that you've given yourself more fuel. You've just signaled to your brain that you're sending more fuel. Then you can go faster. And this is not a decision, because let's, you know, assume you're maximally motivated in both cases. This is clearly something that's going on at an unconscious level, where your brain is then deciding, oh, there's fuel on the way, so we can we can release more fuel to the muscles. And the next twist of that is you can do the same thing with artificially sweetened drinks, and it doesn't work. So this is not just a question of you're tasting sugar and it's telling you, fuel's on the way, because you can have that same taste, you can be unable to distinguish it, but it doesn't work if there's no actual fuel, no carbohydrate, no sugar in the drink. So there's a lot of studies like this where you find ways of manipulating the environment, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel harder to you, but you're able to go faster or push harder. So clearly there's a hidden reserve. We have many ways, including just psychology, just like self-talk, things like that, just changing the inner narrative that can help access this reserve. But it remains where that reserve is, like how it's regulated, is still mostly a mystery.